differential analysis chapter and the key to decision making, and there's lots of different decisions that we cover in this chapter. We look at dropping or retaining a segment, making or buying. We look at volume. We look at managing a constrained resource, sell or process further. But all of those are dependent upon analyzing the relevant cost. And so I'm going to look at a make or buy decision just to kind of get started. And like I said, there's lots of these we can look at, but they're all about the same. But what you're looking for is the relevant cost. In other words, what would be different if I make this decision versus this decision? And so this one, what we're looking at is a make or buy. And so we're manufacturing, and usually where you'll see this is, say they're manufacturing, this one is an engine for heavy equipment, and there's a part, which would be a carburetor, for those of you familiar with engines, and they can either make the carburetor or they can buy the carburetor. And so they're trying to decide what they want to do with that. And so what they have to do is look at all of the relevant costs and determine what they should do. And so what we want to do first of all is find all of our costs. And so we start with our direct materials. Then we have our direct labor. And there's going to be qualitative factors involved in all of these decisions, but what we're looking at right now is simply quantitative. What are the numbers telling us? Variable manufacturing. We have fixed manufacturing, and we're going to look at these separately, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Traceable and allocated. Okay, so it's important that you keep those separate, and we can do this lots of different ways. It depends on what your particular industry is making or buying, and how you're going to look at this. Okay, so this is just some data that we're going to talk about. It doesn't really, I'm not going to get too hung up on telling you the whole story behind this, because I just really want to talk about how we analyze these numbers. Okay, so each one of these is per unit. So I can multiply it by the number of units, and I can get my total cost here. Okay, so there's the information just to kind of start out with in this, and we're talking about carburetors. And on this right here, this fixed manufacturing traceable, a little bit more information for you here. 1/3 of this is supervisor salaries, and 2/3 is depreciation of special equipment. Has no resale value. Okay, something to keep in mind. Okay, so we're looking at, we make engines, and we're looking at whether or not we want to make or buy our carburetors, and we can buy it for $35. So we have to figure out, do we want to make it or do we want to buy it? So some assumptions we have to make and some things that we have to find out. If we're currently making them, what about the facilities? Right now there's no alternate use. There may be later, but right now there's no alternative use for those facilities. And so we're looking at short-term decision making. And it says, what would be the financial advantage? Like, how would we determine whether to make or buy these? What are we going to analyze? So what we want to do is come up with a make or buy chart. I'm going to use some of this information. Not all of it. Okay, if we make it, if we buy it. So if we buy it, obviously we have to purchase it, and that is $35 each. Okay. Now, if we make it, are the direct materials relevant? Yes. Is the direct labor relevant? Yes. Our variable manufacturing, is that relevant? Yes, it is. What about fixed manufacturing traceable? Okay, so let's stop and think about this for a second. 1/3 of that, or $2, is supervisor salaries. 2/3 is special appreciation or depreciation of special equipment which has no resale value. This is what we call a sunk cost, and because that money has already been spent, we cannot sell the equipment. It's sunk. It is not relevant to our decision. So the only thing relevant is the $2 that is part of the supervisor's salary. Our allocated is not relevant. We can't change that within a year. And so we have our total over here. Didn't grab that. And so basically, if we make it, it costs us $29. If we buy it, it costs us $35. And what is the financial advantage? Well, we've got 15,000 of those. And so if we take our 29 minus our 35, and we want to do that first, so we want to put that in parentheses, and we multiply that by the number of units we need, then it's a $90,000 cost savings to make it. Okay, so there's that. So should we accept the outside supplier? Based totally on quantitative or just on the numbers, no, we should not. Now, let's suppose instead, if we do purchase these carburetors for $35, we could use that capacity, because right now we said we had no alternative use. But let's say instead we did have an alternative use, and that alternative use would bring in, so we're going to change the scenario, and it would bring in $150,000 per year. Okay, so now what? What's the financial advantage now? So the financial advantage now for doing that is pretty significant. Show you, it's just $60,000. I mean, that's pretty simple and straightforward. But again, we're making a lot of assumptions here. We're making an assumption that it will bring in $150,000 segment margin per year. We're making an assumption that we can eliminate this cost, the supervisor's salaries, if we buy. And so, again, this is just looking at the numbers. And so the question, should we take it? Yeah, we should. If we can take that space and use it for something else, then we definitely should take the offer. And so the key to this chapter is looking at a cost, and sometimes the way to look at it, for example, we could have put right here, we could have put, I don't want to confuse you, 6 and 4 and 9 and 9. That doesn't change this number at all. And what I did here was I included that sunk cost and I included this, but they're not different. For something to be relevant, they have to be different. This $4 is the same. And so we really don't want to include this in the decision. It muddies the waters and gives you information that you really don't need to make a decision. So keep that in mind as you are going through and working on these problems, and then taking this into your career and helping you solve managerial accounting issues.